Welcome to the deep dive.
Yep.
We're here to really unpack a topic, get right down to what makes it work.
Or in this case, what makes it captivating.
Exactly. Today, it's something that's fascinated people forever. Beauty.
Mm-hmm.
We've looked at sources from, well, all over the place, ancient philosophy, modern brain science.
All circling this core question, really. What is beauty? Is it
Yeah.
real, out there?
Or is it just, how we feel about something? Subjective.
Right. And our goal here is to give you a solid handle on this, sort of a shortcut through all the complexity.
Without getting bogged down.
Precisely. And that core tension you mentioned, objective versus subjective, that's the thread running through everything, isn't it?
It really is. It's the fundamental debate. Is beauty a property of the object or purely in the mind of the beholder?
That's the puzzle we're starting with.
Okay, so let's trace that. We'll go from the ancient Greeks looking for these, perfect universal ideals,
Mm-hmm. The mathematical harmony stuff.
all the way to modern ideas about taste being purely personal.
And we'll touch on what we find beautiful, too. It's not just people, right? Landscapes, ideas.
Yeah, even an elegant argument. And crucially, how beauty standards affect us, society.
Big impact there.
Definitely. So let's jump in. Those early Greek thinkers, the Pythagoreans, for instance, our sources say they saw beauty in order, in harmony, almost like math.
Yeah, it was very much about proportion, wasn't it? Symmetria. They called it not just simple symmetry, but the ideal relationship between parts.
Like in sculpture?
Exactly, like Polykleitos trying to sculpt the quote-unquote perfect human form using these mathematical ratios. It was quite literal for them.
Okay, but then Plato comes along and takes it, way more abstract.
Oh, definitely. He talked about the form of beauty, this perfect ideal existing somewhere else beyond our world.
So the beautiful things we see are just shadows.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Reflections of that ultimate perfect beauty. And for Plato, it wasn't just about looks.
Right, it was tied up with truth and goodness. Kallikagathia.
Mm-hmm. Pursuing beauty was a serious philosophical quest, the highest kind of love, really.
But his student, Aristotle, brought things back down to earth a bit, didn't he?
He did. He still valued things like order and symmetry, but added, definiteness, appropriate size.
Meaning it has to be the right scale. Not too big, not too
Right.
small.
Yeah, something you could take in properly. And he made an interesting distinction between beauty and goodness.
What was that?
Well, he said beauty can exist in static things, like a sculpture, but goodness requires action.
Okay.
He also suggested something could be beautiful if it just did its job really well, fulfilled its purpose effectively.
Interesting. Okay, fast forward quite a bit
Yeah.
to the 18th century. Big shift then, right? Towards this subjective.
Huge shift. You get philosophers like Hume stating very clearly, beauty isn't in the object. It's purely in the mind perceiving it.
Beauty is no quality in things themselves.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Exactly. It exists merely in the mind which contemplates them. That's Hume.
So it becomes all about taste and sentiment, your personal feeling.
Right. Our judgments about beauty are basically just expressions of our feelings. And those feelings can obviously differ hugely between people.
But Kant, he tried to find a middle ground, didn't he? He saw that subjectivity, but also noticed something else.
Yeah, Kant's complex but fascinating. He agreed judgments of taste are subjective, based on pleasure. But he also pointed out that when we call something beautiful, we kind of expect others to agree. We speak as if beauty is objective.
So how did he square that circle?
He talked about subjective universality. The pleasure we get from beauty, he argued, is disinterested. Meaning it's separate from whether we want to own the object or use it, or even if it benefits us personally. It's just the appreciation itself.
Okay.
And this pleasure comes from the free play or harmony between our imagination and understanding mental faculties he believed all humans share.
So because we share the same mental setup, we should, in theory, agree on what's beautiful, even though the feeling is subjective.
That's the idea. It's a claim to universality based on shared human cognitive structures, not on the object itself.
Tricky concept.
Very. And then you have Hegel in the 19th century, adding a historical dimension. Beauty as the sensuous appearance of the idea or spirit.
So art becomes the main way this happens.
Pretty much, yeah. He saw art progressing through history, symbolic, classical, romantic, each showing a different stage and how the spiritual idea relates to its physical form.
And he talked about the end of art.
Famously, yes. He suggested that maybe art wasn't the highest way to grasp truth anymore in the modern world, that philosophy had perhaps taken over.
Wow. Okay, then the 20th century arrives and things get critical.
Yeah, a lot of questioning. Beauty gets linked to power, social inequality, political stuff.
Feminist critiques really highlighted how beauty standards could be oppressive, right?
Mhm.
Controlling women.
Absolutely. It was a necessary critique, forcing a look at the downsides, the problematic side of beauty ideals.
But it didn't just end there. Philosophy revisited beauty.
No, our sources show contemporary thinkers trying to find a more nuanced view, again, acknowledging all those dimensions, subjective, objective, cultural, political, ethical, trying to hold them all together somehow.
Which brings us right back to that core tension. Objective or subjective? After that whole historical journey, where do we stand? Let's look at the arguments for objective beauty first. What's the evidence?
Well, a lot of it comes down to biology, evolutionary psychology, for instance.
The idea that some preferences are hardwired.
Kind of. Things like facial symmetry, clear skin, indicators of health. The argument is these signaled good genes or reproductive fitness to our ancestors, so we evolved to find them attractive.
And there's math too, right? The golden ratio popping up everywhere.
That gets cited a lot, yeah. The presence of certain mathematical patterns in things we consistently find pleasing, from shells to faces to architecture, it suggests some underlying objective structure.
And what about the brain? Neuroscience must have something to say here.
It does. A key finding seems to be the activation of a specific brain area, the medial orbitofrontal cortex, or MOFC.
Right.
This part of the brain's reward circuit lights up pretty consistently when people experience beauty, whether they're looking at art, listening to music, even appreciating a mathematical formula.
The same area for different kinds of beauty.
That's what the studies suggest, yeah.
Yeah.
Which points towards, potentially, a common neural basis for aesthetic pleasure, an objective marker in the brain.
Okay, that sounds like a strong case for objectivity. But
Right.
then, the subjective side. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That feels very true sometimes.
Absolutely. And the evidence here is overwhelming, too. Just look at different cultures.
Yeah, anthropology shows massive variation, doesn't it? Body size, skin tone preferences.
Totally. Neck rings, scarification, tattoos, things considered incredibly beautiful in one place might be seen completely differently elsewhere. That strongly suggests beauty is learned, it's cultural.
And even within one culture, tastes vary wildly. One person loves a piece of music, another hates it.
Exactly. Our own personal history, our mood, our unique psychology, it all feeds into what we find beautiful at any given moment. Neuroscience sees this individual variation too. It's not just the MOFC lighting up identically for everyone.
So it really seems like it can't be just objective or just subjective. It's got to be more complicated.
That's where most thinking lands now, yeah. It's likely an interaction. Objective features in the world trigger subjective responses, cognitive, emotional, and all of that happens within a specific cultural context.
So biology gives us maybe some predispositions.
Right, maybe a starting point, like the MOFC response or certain evolutionary preferences.
But culture and personal experience shape it massively.
Precisely. It's this complex interplay. Think back to Kant trying to find universality in the subjective experience itself, or how evolutionary ideas can allow for both innate biases and cultural learning.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about what we find beautiful. It's such a huge range, isn't it? Not just looks.
Definitely not. Nature is a huge one. Landscapes, sunsets, animals.
And how we see nature has changed too, right? From divine order to romantic awe.
Exactly. And art constantly draws on nature, sometimes trying to copy it, other times using it symbolically.
Then there's abstract beauty. This is fascinating. Math proofs, scientific theories.
Yeah, the elegance. Mathematicians talk about it all the time, the beauty of a proof that's simple, surprising, yet rigorous. Scientists feel it too when a theory just perfectly explains something complex.
Is there something similar going on there, like symmetry or simplicity?
It seems so. Qualities like coherence, simplicity, symmetry, they seem valued aesthetically across domains. And interestingly, studies show experiencing mathematical beauty can activate that same reward center, the MOFC.
Wow, so there's a deep connection.
Suggests a fundamental human appreciation for elegant structures, whether sensory or purely intellectual.
And then, of course, human beauty, probably the most discussed, maybe the most fraught.
For sure. And it's both outer, physical attractiveness and inner qualities.
The evolutionary arguments come back here for physical traits, symmetry, youth, health signals.
Yes, suggesting those might be somewhat universal cues we pick up on, but again, hugely shaped by culture and individual taste. What's considered the ideal body, for instance, varies enormously.
And what about inner beauty? Kindness, intelligence, humor.
That plays a massive role. There's this psychological effect, the what is beautiful is good halo effect, but also the reverse. We often find people more physically attractive if we perceive them as having positive inner traits.
So the two are intertwined.
Deeply. Some philosophers even argue appearance expresses character. It's this dynamic mix of the physical and the perceived inner self, all filtered through cultural lenses.
Which leads us nicely into society's role. These beauty standards, they aren't fixed, are they?
Not at all. Look at history. The ideal female body shape, for example. It's swung wildly over time.
From like the full figure signifying fertility in ancient times?
To the much slimmer ideals often promoted today. These shifts reflect changing cultural values, economics, health ideas, everything.
And cross-culturally, the differences are just as stark today.
Absolutely. Skin tone, facial features, body modifications. It underlines how much beauty is constructed by society.
And how are these norms spread?
Yep.
Family, friends?
All those, yes. But the media, traditional and especially social media, now plays a huge role in communicating and reinforcing particular ideals.
And that can really affect people's self-esteem, right? The gap between the ideal and how you see yourself.
A huge impact, yes. Internalizing those often narrow standards can be damaging.
But people push back too, don't they? There are other aesthetics out there.
Oh, definitely. Our sources mention things like wabi-sabi from Japan, finding beauty in imperfection, impermanence, roughness.
Which is kind of the opposite of the polished perfection we often see.
Exactly. Or think of brutalist architecture. Raw, stark, honest about its materials. Not conventionally pretty, but aesthetically powerful for some.
In camp, with its love of irony and exaggeration.
Right. Or the grotesque, kitsch, materialist aesthetics. They all challenge mainstream norms, finding value in things like artifice, bad taste, decay, or just the material itself. They show beauty isn't monolithic.
You often need the context to appreciate them, though.
Very much so. Understanding the cultural background or the artistic intent is key.
Okay, so we've got the object, the culture.
Yeah.
Let's go inside the mind. Psychology and neuroscience. What happens when we perceive beauty?
Well, psychology highlights that it's an active process. How easily our brain processes something, processing fluency, seems linked to that initial pleasant feeling.
Easier is better.
Often, yes, initially. But complexity matters too. We don't just like super simple things. Finding that sweet spot of complexity is part of it. And crucially, it's emotional.
Not just simple pleasure, right? It can be deeper.
Yes, beauty can evoke awe, that feeling of wonder, being part of something bigger. Experiencing awe is actually linked to well-being.
So beauty is good for us, psychologically.
It seems so. It can be calming, stimulating. Our response also depends on things like our own empathy levels. Engaging with beauty appears beneficial.
And neuroaesthetics brings us back to the brain circuits, the MOFC again.
That remains a key finding, yeah. Its activation across different types of beauty suggests that common neural currency for aesthetic pleasure.
But it's not the only thing happening.
No, definitely not. It's part of a wider network involving sensory areas, areas for cognitive appraisal, emotional processing. Scientists are still mapping it all out. It's complex.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, it's clear beauty is incredibly multifaceted. It's biology, culture, psychology, philosophy, all tangled together.
It really resists simple definitions.
And looking ahead, technology seems poised to shake things up even more.
For sure. AI and VR are already changing things like cosmetics, fashion, offering hyper-personalization.
Digital avatars, too. Changing how we see ourselves, maybe?
Potentially, yeah. It raises questions about self-representation, more freedom, or new pressures to conform to digital ideals.
And then there's the really sci-fi stuff. Bioenhancements, gene editing.
Right. Technologies that could allow altering appearance in fundamental ways. Huge ethical questions there about safety, access, fairness. What does it even mean to be human if we can redesign ourselves so drastically?
That's pretty heavy.
It is, but at the same time, you have these strong social countercurrents, body positivity, inclusivity movements pushing back against narrow traditional norms.
So a kind of push and pull. Technology offering new ways to conform or change, while social movements demand broader acceptance.
Exactly. The future of beauty seems caught between these forces, the tech possibilities and the drive for diversity.
So the final thought for you, the listener, is really about that future. How will technology reshape beauty? Will AI, VR, biotech lead to more diversity, more personal expression?
Or could they create new, maybe even stricter forms of conformity? Something to definitely keep pondering long after we finish here.